This conference will now be recorded.
Roll number 4.
సార్
Roll number 4. Yeah.
సార్
Clear
సార్
వినపడుతుందా?
కనిపిస్తుంది సార్
Screen?
కనిపిస్తుంది సార్
Okay. Voice clear గా ఉందా?
వాయిస్ క్లియర్ గానే ఉంది సార్.
Okay. So yeah, in my coming two classes, I'll be discussing about a very important and contemporary topic, and that is the aspects covering the pharmacotherapy of diabetes mellitus. So in this particular chapter, we need to remember about few important things with regard to the disease. It is a very common metabolic or endocrine disorder, which is very much prevalent throughout the world, as well as in India, and more so in southern states, and more so in our state, Andhra Pradesh. And the importance of this particular disease is uh, epidemiology, pathology, clinical presentation, has its larger impact on various other micro and macrovascular implications with respect to other diseases, say like diabetes and heart disease, diabetes obesity, diabetes thyroid disorders, diabetes pregnancy, diabetes in small children, that is juvenile onset of diabetes. So there are different pathologies or different reasons which are contributing to the development of this particular entity, that is diabetes mellitus. Usually, as it goes with common knowledge, like there are two important things. One is diabetes type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is usually at very early age, and it directly correlates with absolute or relative very less amount of insulin produced from the beta cells of the islet cells of pancreas. So in islet cells, we have these alpha cells which secrete. There is an exocrine part and an endocrine part. Exocrine part, it is usually associated with the pancreatic lipase, all the elaboration of enzymes which are important for the digestion. And in endocrine part, we have this part, that is the islet part, which comes in interaction with various other stimuli, say like neuroendocrinal, various other neurotransmitters having their direct and indirect effect on the regulation and release of insulin that happens usually in the body. So as far as insulin is concerned, it is secreted from the uh, beta cells of the islets of Langerhans of the pancreas. And apart from that, we have alpha cells which secrete glucagon. Its secretion amounts to around 25%, and the insulin that is secreted from beta cells accounts to around 75%. Not last but the least, the delta cells, they secrete somatostatin. So all these cells, which are in close vicinity, sitting on the islets of Langerhans of pancreas, they their secretions and their auto-regulation will be done with the effect of all these different hormones which are being endogenous in the system. Meaning to say that they have their effect. Like insulin is going to show some effect on glucagon. Glucagon is going to show some effect on insulin release. Similarly, somatostatin is going to control both the release of insulin and glucagon, inhibit the release of insulin and glucagon. Whereas whereas glucagon will have a positive effect on the release of insulin and somatostatin. So these three synthesized hormones from different parts of the cells of islets of Langerhans will work in communion, and they will produce an synchronized, well-balanced output, fine-tuning the overall regulation of the glucose status in the body. So here to know a little bit about the insulin which is being released from the beta cells of the pancreas. So there will be a basal secretion of insulin throughout the day, the 24-hour cycle throughout. And more importantly, the insulin has a unique character. Say like when you are giving food, maybe say like breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it will go, especially it has more stimulation when it is given through oral route than that of the IV. So orally given insulin can go and stimulate through the GIT certain important hormones like uh, glu glucose insulinotropic peptide, that is GIP, and many incretins. Incretins are the hormones which are released from the GIT, which will go and have an effect on the immediate and exuberant release of insulin from the pancreas immediately after a meal. Because after the meal only, the blood glucose concentrations will increase dramatically and instantly. And to deal with that particular part of the insulin release, as compared to the basal insulin that happens at a very slow and consistent rate, to deal with that sudden surge in the glucose in the blood, that this oral injection and the stimulation by incretins, that the insulin secretion is enhanced, and that will deal with the uh, glucose metabolism part of the insulin. So how it will mediate, how it will go and express the transporters of the almost all of the cells. And there is a relative preponderance in their effects and activities over a wide variety of tissues. Say like it is more active on the liver, muscle, adipocytes and all that. Whereas brain, RBCs and some other parts of the body tissues, they are relatively less prone to this particular role of insulin in establishing the entry of glucose and its metabolism in the body. So why does the insulin and the metabolism of glucose have such a great effect in the pathogenesis of diabetes over a acute time and a chronic or long run of time? Because all the excess glucose that comes into the blood without being allowed into the cells, which definitely needs the presence of adequate insulin in the body, being one aspect, and also the sensitivity of the tissues to the insulin. Though insulin is there, it should be sensitive enough to that particular muscle, fat, or other tissues to allow the insulin to go and act on those receptors and then allow the glucose into them, then allow its metabolism and thereby all the cells. So when all this system fails, so it goes without saying that usually the manifestation of the diabetes mellitus with these symptoms, majorly hyperglycemia, glycosuria, then negative nitrogen balance, hyperlipemia, ketonemia, all these things come up as an metabolic derangement or a consequence of the lack of insulin, which is the important pathological part that happens in the pathology of diabetes mellitus. In type 1, there is complete lack of it attributed to the development of antibodies, and thereby there will be very little or no insulin, wherein that is juvenile onset diabetes, wherein the patients have to be supplemented with insulin as such from outside exogenously in the form of medication at very frequent intervals to meet with the body's physiological needs or demands. Other one is type 2, that is late onset or adult onset diabetes, type 2 diabetes mellitus, and it too has different reasons and pathologies attributing to its pathogenesis over time. But mostly it is due to the decrease in the beta cell response in generation of the insulin, and also increased in insulin resistance owing to different factors, say like obesity, increased waist circumference, total body fat, and many other. A little bit of genetics is also involved over in this type 2 diabetes mellitus pathogenesis as well. So here the patient will be usually around middle age, say like 40 or 50 years. He will be having this onset of type 2 diabetes mellitus. And then type 3, it is MODY, maturity onset of diabetes in young, and then type 4, gestational diabetes. So there are different kinds of diabetes as such. But overall, the pathology of it lies in the decrease in the release of secretion of insulin from the beta cells of the islets of pancreas. So how do we deal about it? So here the major role of insulin comes in all these 2 to 3 settings. That is type 1 diabetes mellitus, definitely they have to be given insulin. And then in type 2 diabetes mellitus, yes, oral medications can be given to stimulate whatever remnant pancreas is there, to stimulate it, to decrease the peripheral resistance of glucose utilization, and then give oral medications, different oral anti-diabetic medications to deal with the insulin deficiency, to make out for it. And then type 4, that is gestational diabetes mellitus, definitely insulin is given because administration of most of the drugs in a pregnant woman to deal with that GD and gestational diabetes is not advisable. These are all some of the important considerations. And as far as biochemistry of insulin goes, it is a 51 amino acid protein with 2 chains, A and B chains, 21 and 30 chains together, bound by a disulfide bond. So they, after getting released from the islets of pancreas from those cells, they will go and bind with almost all of the different cells of the body, making certain subtle changes in the cells, like deploying of GLUT4, GLUT transport receptors on the membranes of the cells, which will allow the intake of glucose for further metabolism and ATP generation and so on. So this is important. And you have GLUT1 transporters present on the pancreas itself, which, so the first stimulus for the production of insulin itself is the glucose, which comes in contact with the GLUT1 transporters present on the pancreas, and that will lead to a series of molecular events which will further enhance the production of insulin in the body. So which will go about in the next slide. So this class, the learning objectives of this class would be what is insulin and how will it have its effect on different physiological systems, and what is its pharmacological role as a therapeutic uh, agent in the treatment of type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes mellitus. What are the different forms of insulin that are available for us, which we can use judiciously depending upon the need, and what are the pharmacokinetic parameters which will really dictate of how they should be used in different kinds of diabetes mellitus. So this is one important aspect that we need to remember. Not all insulins are alike. So different insulins have different role and different effects in the mediation of different insulins have different role in the mediation of uh, these things that one need to do. And one more important thing about it is like uh, how do we give them, when we have to give them, how we have to monitor the insulin that is being given, and what are the side effects that one can expect of. So these are all the different therapeutic propositions in front of the clinician to fine tune, modulate, calibrate, then tailor-made the treatment to the patient needs accordingly, depending upon his glycemic status, which is by and large uh, seen seen with investigations like blood glucose profile, which includes fasting blood glucose and postprandial blood glucose and HbA1c, that is glycated hemoglobin. So for regular routine practice, we can use a glucometer, which will tell us about the glycemic status. So if you take a fasting blood glucose level, it should be anything around less than 100 for a normal person. 100 to 126 shows that he is a borderline person treading towards the pathogenesis of establishing the diabetes mellitus. And anything more than 126 fasting, 126 mg per dl would be manifest diabetes mellitus. And as far as postprandial blood glucose is there, so it should be less than 150 mg per dl in a sample that is taken 2 hours post any food or standard glucose load that is given. And if it is more than 200, then it's a manifest diabetes mellitus. And as far as one more important other parameter to gauge the glycemic status of the body is HbA1c, that is glycated hemoglobin. 5.6 is taken as 5.6% is taken as the normal. Anything less than 5.6 is normal. 5.6 to 6.5 being the pre-diabetic, or the person is slowly trending towards the pathology of diabetes. So it usually happens around say like 30 to 40 or 50 years in a person who is non-diabetic, if he has certain genetic preponderance, environmental effects, stress, obesity, all other factors would push him towards the diabetic status in course of time. Anything more than 6.5 is manifest diabetes mellitus for that matter. So after that, it is that we have to manage or plan a schedule for the patient, plan a schedule for the patient, which will allow us to plan a schedule, which will tell us that how we have to plan the schedules for him, like how we have to go for either oral medication or even for that matter insulin doses or whatsoever. So this is a brief introduction regarding like how we need to think or deal with the glycemic status of patients. Roll number 4.
Sir.
Roll number 4. వినిపిస్తుందా నాన్న?
వినిపిస్తుంది సార్.
CH Manoj 22. CH Manoj 22. Y Sivaramaraju 107.
సార్ వినిపిస్తుంది సార్.
ఎవరమ్మా ఇది మాట్లాడేది?
శివరామ్ సార్ 107.
107. అయితే మనోడు లేడా ఏంటి? మనోజ్ లేడా? Manoj Babu absconding. Not there. Okay. I expect that all of you people are listening to this very important class. Vishnu 58. Vishnu 58. How many people are listening? Sai Rishmat ready? 135. Srila P.
Sir?
You there?
Yes, sir.
I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Sivaram Chand.
Yes, sir.
Sivaram Chand, you're there. Ramaraju.
Yes, sir.
Good. So yeah, so we'll slowly move on into the lesson and some of the important details that we need to discuss about it. I'm not going to get into the very deep, intricate details of it, and I will leave it for you guys to read and get a good idea of about it. But I will tell most important tenets or basics, which are very important for us in managing case of diabetes, and especially this class will be totally revolving around insulin only. And then the next class we'll be discussing about oral hypoglycemic agents as well. So these are some of the things that one need to keep in mind. Say like what are the different metabolic changes that will be happening. As I've told you already, types of diabetes, type 1 diabetes, IDD, and juvenile onset. So these are some of the important points that one need to know. Then type 2 NADDM, that is maturity onset. Here also I told you. Then the causes for them. I think this part also I discussed to some extent. Then yeah, this part also I think I completed. Then yeah, so coming to the pharmacological actions of insulin. So what is it that the insulin is going to do? So it promotes the uptake and storage of glucose, then fats and proteins, and its major effects are on liver, muscles, and adipose tissues. And they influence the cell growth and metabolic functions of various tissues. And excess secretion of insulin. Excess secretion of insulin can lead to hypoglycemia. Because as you know, when there is insulin deficiency, as it happens in the diabetes mellitus pathology, there is hyperglycemia. So if there is excess of insulin secretion, then automatically that will lead to hypoglycemia. Then there are different effects of insulin, among which there are some rapid effects. So what are the rapid effects means? Insulin will decrease the blood glucose levels by affecting both the glucose utilization and production. So its effect on the carbohydrate metabolism will go like this. Especially in the liver cells, it will decrease the glycogenolysis by inhibiting the enzyme glycogen phosphorylase. Then it will increase the it will increase the glycogenolysis, then decrease the conversion of glycogen to glucose. Basically, it's an anabolic hormone. So it will try to uh, make up for more storage. So increase of glucogen synthesis, like glycogen synthesis will be there, and decrease gluconeogenesis will be there. So that is what it will happen in liver. Then coming to muscles, it will facilitate the glucose uptake by promoting translocation of the intracellular GLUT4 onto the cell surface. As I've told you, as in with all other cells, and also more importantly with the muscle, which is a very important tissue mass or organs where the glucose will be taken into them. So it is here that the patients will develop insulin resistance when a lot of fat happens to be in between the muscles, resisting the entry of glucose into the muscles, and thereby leading to hyperglycemia, glucose load, insulin resistance, and decreased peripheral utilization of glucose in the muscle. So all these things happen over here. And it also promotes glycolysis, that is conversion of glucose and ADP to lactate and ATP, which are a source of energy for voluntary and cardiac muscles. Then it has certain role in adipose tissue as well. So it facilitates the glucose uptake through GLUT4 receptors. It increases the intracellular glucose oxidative metabolism. So glycerol produced is esterified with fatty acids to form triglycerides. So there is increased synthesis of fatty acids and triglycerides, fatty acids and thereby triglycerides. So this is what is the important change that happens in the adipose tissue or fat metabolism. Then protein metabolism, there is in the liver cells there is decreased protein breakdown and decreased oxidation of the amino acids. So as you know, like there is also something called as gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is the synthesis of glucose from the sources other than the one from the glucose metabolism. That is, say, like from the source of glucose being amino acids, fatty acids, and so on. And then in muscles, there will be increased protein synthesis. As I've told you, basically it's an anabolic hormone. So it will build for the protein synthesis, and that will lead to positive nitrogen balance. So it is why that here it becomes very important in maintaining the balance between different intermediary metabolisms from carbohydrate, fat, and protein metabolism, and leading to a final anabolic outcome. So then that is why you can see so many symptoms correlating with the reverse effects of insulin or catabolic effects on the muscle, protein, liver, and other tissues, which will lead finally to the expression of the signs and symptoms which are pathognomonic of diabetes mellitus, say like weakness, lassitude, and so many other symptoms which are to do with the muscle and its fitness. Then fat metabolism, yeah, increased lipogenesis, increased fatty acid synthesis, and triglyceride formation, decrease in lipolysis. And then other metabolic effects being it stimulates lipoprotein lipase and thus increases the clearance of VLDL and chylomicrons. And there are some long-term effects of insulin as such. Insulin, it regulates the gene transcription and stimulates cell proliferation and differentiation. So the acute effects being the deployment of GLUT4 receptors on different tissues, say like liver, adipose tissue, muscle, and fat or adipose tissues, and lead to all the anabolic effects and facilitating the entry of glucose into the GLUT4 receptors in the muscle, and thereby production of ATP, energy, and lactate, and aiding in the glucose metabolism is one such very important acute and short effect. Besides the long-term effects being insulin going and acting and producing its effects by acting on different substrate proteins, say like mitogen activated protein kinase, MAP kinase, then some of the GNE proteins, which are guanine nucleotide exchange proteins, and certain substrate proteins. There are a wide variety of unnamed innumerable substrate proteins, which through the process of transcription and producing certain regulatory proteins have their effect on the cell proliferation and differentiation. So this is one of the important long-term effects that insulin is going to demonstrate in the body. And it also governs protein synthesis and growth regulation. So now that we have been reiterating about the same point time and again, that it's an anabolic hormone aiding in the building up of muscle, making up of fatty acids, amino acids, proteins, and all that. So these long-term effects are being mediated by the transcription from the mRNA, which are in turn directed by the substrate proteins, which by undergoing different levels of molecular changes and activation will initiate the synthesis of so and said regulatory proteins, having their effect on the cellular proliferation and differentiation. Then there is also DNA mediated synthesis of glucose transporters, GLUT5, but more importantly, it's GLUT4 that is very important for its deployment on different cell general tissues, allowing the entry of glucose into them and thereby further metabolic processes. So coming to dynamics part, how do this insulin work? So for this, perhaps maybe we have to see about this animation, wherein the insulin comes and binds to the, so the blue one is the alpha subunit. Blue one, what you see over here on the screen, is the alpha subunit, and the red one is the beta subunit. And then after the insulin comes and binds to the alpha subunit, and that will lead to some of the tyrosine protein kinases phosphorylation over the beta subunit, and then the insulin molecule is internalized, and this binding of insulin will activate this particular insulin receptor, and that will lead to phosphorylation of several substrate proteins, say like insulin receptor substrate protein 1, which will lead to the activation of it, and thereby the phosphorylation cascade related with the PI3 kinase, IP3 DAG. So that will lead to all these metabolic effects like increased glucose uptake, increased glucose utilization, and decreased glycogen breakdown, and increase in the stores with relation to the glycogen, fats, and proteins. So all the anabolic effects that are due to come there. So this is the thing that will happen. And apart from that, as I have told you, it is going to have certain effects on the GNE proteins, that is guanine nucleotide exchange proteins, and it also exerts its long-term effects by acting on the mitogen activated protein kinases, thereby directing the transcription mechanism to produce certain regulatory proteins, which will have the long-term effects on cellular proliferation and differentiation as such. And the insulin is, after it exerts its effect at different levels to produce the intended effect. And yes, one of the important immediate effect of it being the deployment of GLUT4 transporters on the plasma membrane. So as you can see, so this is the transporter that is being deployed as a result of the effect of these IRS and GNE proteins and all that. They will facilitate the transport of GLUT4 transporter that is present in the cytoplasm, this red one, that go and they get deployed on the plasma membrane of these cells of say muscle, other tissues, liver, fat, and so on. So thereby this transporter, this GLUT4 transporter is very important in the entry of glucose, whatever you see extracellularly, to come into the cell. Yeah, so this is how different transporters that are being deployed are being put on the cell. So if you have to go step by step. It acts on insulin receptor, which is a large transmembrane glycoprotein consists of 2 alpha and 2 beta subunits linked by disulfide bonds to constitute a beta alpha alpha beta heterotetramer. And the beta units contain the tyrosine kinase residues. When insulin binds to the alpha subunits, it's not submits, it's subunits at outside of the cell surface, the tyrosine kinase activity in the beta subunits is stimulated, results in autophosphorylation of the adjuvant beta subunit and phosphorylation of the tyrosine residues present on the cytoplasmic protein called the IRS1. They will lead to initiation of a series of events that lead to a cascade of phosphorylation and dephosphorylation reactions. It is how you see insulin comes and binds to the alpha subunits and then activation of the beta subunits, and then that will lead to a series of reactions involving the phosphorylation of the substrate proteins like IRS and other ones, which will activate the GNE proteins MAP kinase PI3, which will have their effect by establishing the deployment of GLUT4 transporters, the red ones which you see on the cell membrane, allowing the entry of glucose into the cell, and thereby which will further enhance to lead to these effects, that is increase in glucose uptake, glucose utilization, decreased glycogen breakdown, and all other things that have happened. So this is in brief a model of the role of insulin, showing its acute effects immediately in the presentation or deployment of glucose transporters of the membrane of the cell, where this insulin is coming and acting. Where is this insulin coming from? It is coming again from the islets of the Langerhans, the beta cells. So from where the 75% of the insulin which is being released comes, and it acts in concert with glucagon and somatostatin, which are just released adjacent to them. And it is also having an permissible effect of the cholinergic and adrenergic system on its regulation as well. But it is very dismal or minimal as such. Then yeah, so this is very important that we got to know about what is insulin, what are its effects on the physiological systems, and then what are its pharmacodynamics, means what is the effects that it is going to exert on the body by acting at different cells, different tissues, and different intermediary metabolism. Now coming to the topic proper. So finally, when we have discussed so much about it, so now it goes without saying that how are we going to give the insulin to the patient? So how is it going to be really helpful? What is its role? So to know that, so how is first of all insulin synthesized? So if we get back to the history of insulin, like when it was discovered and how who made it, and maybe it was in 1921 that Banting and Best they first demonstrated the hypoglycemic action of the pancreatic extract which was containing insulin. So they were able to successfully delineate the exocrine part from the endocrine part and take about only that tissue which had the components of islets and which had insulin and which was able to show the hypoglycemic effect. So it was Banting and Best first demonstrated, and thereby the full chemical structure was worked out by Sanger, and they unraveled the structure of this particular insulin molecule with two different chains A and B, and they have been able to isolate it from pork, beef, and previously we used to have the insulin synthesized from those two animals or tissues or their pancreas, but now we are able to recombinantly synthesize insulin which is as close to that of the human insulin itself. So due to substitution or changes in the sequence or places of amino acids at certain positions, say like say 8th and 10th amino acids in the A chain and 30th amino acid in the B chain, we are able to synthesize. These are the places wherein there are certain subtle changes in their molecular structures, making them different from one another. But more or less, if a person is put on a porcine insulin or bovine insulin, if at all is not demonstrating an allergy to that particular protein, it is well and good that you may continue with it. But of late, many advanced countries, say like United States and United Kingdom, mostly they have already stopped the use of insulin that is derived from other animals as such. As of now, all of the countries, they are mostly dependent on the recombinant insulins or the insulins which are close to that of the human structure as such. because it is producing almost all the same effects as that of the physiological insulin that is produced in the body. Then coming to the different kinds of insulin, this is a very important slide wherein you are shown like different insulins, what are the different insulins, what is their source, and when do they act, what is the duration, and what are some important comments that we need to remember with regard to their making. So here you can see this insulin lispro and insulin aspart. Insulin lispro and insulin aspart. So here you can see like they are rapid acting, are also called as ultra short acting insulins. And one important thing that we need to remember about is if it were an endogenously produced physiological insulin, so the plasma T-half of the insulin would be around 5 to 9 minutes only. It is only around 5 to 9 minutes. So the brisk insulin response to the oral meal or any glucose load given to the body, which will release the insulin from the pancreas and which would be the plasma for 5 to 9 minutes. And all the acute effects, which would be elaborated in say some milliseconds to seconds, like deployment of all these transporters, then facilitating the entry of glucose into the cells and uh, enhancing the peripheral utilization of the glucose and increase in the glycogen synthesis and other anabolic effects like making up of the fatty acids and triglycerides and some of the amino acids for muscle building. All this will happen within a very short time, but all the cellular growth, proliferation, differentiation, such kind of long-term effects will take certain amount of time. So the main concern with regarding to the treatment of the diabetes mellitus with respect to the glycemic status of the person, that is hyperglycemia, to prevent hyperglycemia would be to time the dosing of insulin with that of the glucose level of the body. So for example, I can tell you like if the person is sleeping in the night, so his insulin requirement with regard to the glucose status in his body would be very minimal because there is no glucose surge in the body. But the case will be different when a person is taking some amount of food, maybe like just after the breakfast or just after the lunch or just after the dinner. The glucose levels in the body will shoot up in the blood immediately post 30 or minutes or 1 hour post the food, because the glucose that is present in the food that will be broken down and absorbed into the blood, so that should now gain entry into the muscle tissues, adipose tissues, and all peripheral parts of the body. So for that to happen, the insulin should release. So as I've told you already, there are two types of insulin release in the body. One is basal insulin release, which will happen at the rate of say around 0.1 unit or 1 unit constantly throughout. Whereas there is food induced insulin release. So whenever there is a surge in glucose due to the food given, so immediately there will be a brisk release or exuberant release of insulin from the pancreas in order to meet with the increased glucose overload. So this should happen. So these mechanisms failing in patients with diabetes, we are going to supplement them with different kinds of insulins having different roles and different kinetic and other parameters which will decide when they have to be used in which kinds of patients, and all these things will come into our role. So ultra short acting insulins are rapid acting insulins, then they will have short acting insulins, they're also called as regular insulin. Then you have intermediate acting insulins and long acting insulins. So it goes without saying that as the name itself suggests that they are going to act within 10 to 20 minutes and their duration of action is around 3 to 4 hours. Then you have short acting insulins, which are of course some of the commonly used insulins, and their onset of action would take around 30 to 60 minutes. Then you have intermediate acting insulins, which take around 1 to 2 hours to act, and long acting insulins, they will take around 4 to 6 hours to act. And you have a duration of action, that is 3 to 4 hours for rapid acting or ultra short acting insulins, 5 to 8 hours for short acting insulins, and intermediate acting insulins will have around 16 to 18 hours, and long acting insulins will have around 20 to 36 hours. That is one complete day. Having said that, it means that if you are giving insulin dose maybe say in the morning, then you can repeat the dose the next morning. or else if you're giving an insulin dose tonight, then you can just give another dose next tomorrow night, like this. So, but what is one most important parameter that dictates the choice of these insulins in any particular patient? So it depends upon the person's blood glucose and its fluctuations, his diet, lifestyle, exercise, and so many other parameters. So ideally the dose of the insulin has to be calculated depending upon the patient. So mostly type 1 patients, they require around 0.4 to 0.8 units per kg per day. In type 2 diabetes mellitus patients, it may vary, ranging from 0.2 to 1.6 units per kg per day. But more so, if the patients are overweight or obese, there may be the need of giving furthermore dose in those particular patients. So it depends on the uh, glycemic status, like say what are their regular fasting or postprandial levels, and what is the kind of food they are taking. Is their food composition consisting more of sugars or simple sugars or complex sugars? So it depends to an extent. And then apart from that, uh, their body weight. So all these things will be very important in it. And coming to one more important point, like what will make all these insulins different from each other, like having their impact on the kinetics, like their duration of action, that being rapid acting, short acting, or regular, intermediate acting. So as you can see here, it is an recombinant insulin having made some changes produced by reversing the amino acids at a certain level, that is lysine and proline at 28 at 29 positions. And so actually insulin, once given into the body at different sites, it will go and form hexamers. So the ability to form hexamers and their dissociation is one important aspect that will decide about the action. If they are very loosely associated or they can be easily dissociated, then their action will be very fast. So you can see like they can exert their action in 10 to 20 minutes straight. As far as regular insulin, that is crystalline zinc insulin, is considered. So here you can see that this particular insulin, that is stabilized by a small amount of zinc. So the insulin molecules, they stabilize around this zinc molecules and form a hexamer, and after that insulin subcutaneous injection is given, they are slowly gradually diluted and their dispersal into the bloodstream happens in a slow pace. Say like it will be happen, the onset will happen at around 30 to 60 minutes and the duration of action will be around 5 to 8 hours, as you can see. So these absorption patterns of different insulins, by the way of how they are being complexed with different things like say like zinc and all that, that will make that will have an impact on their duration of action, making them like ultra short or rapid acting, short acting, regular ones, and intermediate acting and long acting. So here it is important that we can design different regimens for different patients, not like one shot fits everybody. So everybody has to be designed a different tailor-made treatment protocol, depending upon their individual needs, their work, their diet, their exercise, their body, their weight, and all such parameters. So you have to decide, like, are you going to put them on a long acting insulin and supplement it with ultra short acting insulins at regular intervals, or are you going to put them on regular insulin or soluble insulin? So it all depends, but ideally it is the norm that mostly a long acting preparation will be put as an basal cover, which will be ensuring that there is an continuous consistent flow or supply of insulin throughout the day, which is in between supplemented with ultra short acting insulin, say like Lispro or Aspart, given just before they have their meal, either breakfast, lunch, or dinner, so that this particular need of immediate surge of glucose that happens just immediately after food will be supplemented by the this immediate action of the insulin. And thereafter, as postprandially the glucose comes down slowly due to the action of this particular insulin, the long acting or basal insulin will take its role. So there are different regimens which are put in place to see that we strike a balance between the management of blood glucose and the dose of insulin that is given. So it is important that how you make this, like you make a combination of this long acting and short acting preparations or intermediate acting and short acting preparations, and whether you want to go for multiple daily injections or a single dose injections, or there are some things like say split mixed regimen wherein we utilize regular insulin with then lent or isophane insulin. So we mix the short acting and intermediate acting insulins, and a combination of them in the ratio of either 30-70 or 50-50, having means 30 of short acting insulin and 70 of intermediate acting insulin, or 50 of short acting insulin and 50 of intermediate acting insulin can be combined, and their total dose will be calculated, and that will be given to the patient twice a day. But this kind of combinations will not have absolute control over the glucose surge that will happen immediately post meal. So here this may this can lead to some kind of uh, uh, the surge in glucose levels immediately after the food. This may not come, so this combination may not prove worthy. So the most established and trusted one being the basal cover with long-acting insulin and supplementing it with ultra short-acting insulins through the day whenever the food is being given. But that will add for say some 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 injections per day, and also the cost of the insulin treatment that's going to increase. So all these things come into play. So it is all up to the physician and the condition of the patient, whether which will dictate or decide of which kind of treatment regimen one has to follow with regard to the compliance and all these parameters that should be taken into account. And I think Reshma 128. Reshma 128. Raj Manohar 53. Raj Manohar.
సార్
రాజ్ మనోహర్ ఏ బాబు వింటున్నావా క్లాసు?
వింటున్నా సార్.
ఏం వింటున్నావు చెప్పు, ఒక 2 ఇంపార్టెంట్ పాయింట్స్. ఇన్సులిన్ ఎన్ని టైప్స్ ఉంటాయి?
షార్ట్ యాక్టింగ్, అల్ట్రా షార్ట్
షార్ట్ యాక్టింగ్, అల్ట్రా షార్ట్ యాక్టింగ్,
ఇంటర్మీడియట్ యాక్టింగ్.
ఇంటర్మీడియట్ యాక్టింగ్. ఇంకేమైనా ఉందా అవి కాకుండా? లాంగ్
అంతే
యాక్టింగ్.
సార్, 3 టైప్స్. లాంగ్ యాక్టింగ్, షార్ట్ యాక్టింగ్, అల్ట్రా షార్ట్ యాక్టింగ్, ఇంటర్మీడియట్ యాక్టింగ్, లాంగ్ యాక్టింగ్.
ఓకే ఓకే. అసలు ఎందుకు వాడతాం ఇన్సులిన్ మనం? Why do you use insulin at all? What is the need? Where do you use?
అండ్ ఇన్సులిన్ రెసిస్టెన్స్ లో కానీ, ఇన్సులిన్ లెవెల్స్ డిక్రీజ్ అయినప్పుడు కానీ వాడతాం సార్.
ఎప్పుడు అవుతాయి ఇన్సులిన్ లెవెల్స్ డిక్రీజ్?
జువెనైల్ ఇన్సులిన్ బీటా సెల్స్ డిస్ట్రక్ట్ అయినప్పుడు సార్.
Beta cells destruct. So when beta cells are destructed, you can simply put it like type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is a pathophysiological entity associated with the derangement of the insulin release. Okay. Reasons could be many. It could be type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, whatever. So it is here that we are going to supplement the insulin, which the beta cells of pancreas are not going to make by themselves. So that is one pressing parameter. Okay. So what do you think will be the most common complication of insulin therapy? If suppose you are a doctor and you are prescribing insulin to the patient, what is a possibility that the patient may immediately call you for help?
Hypoglycemia.
Very good, very good. First important thing is hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia is one thing. So why will it happen, hypoglycemia?
due to it might be more insulin or
Yes, yes, yes. If the patient is not able to properly uh, what to
tolerate.
calculate or not tolerate, if I say please take 10 units of insulin before your lunch, okay, if I tell take 10 units of insulin before your lunch, inadvertently if you write 10 and the patient sees it like 16, and if he takes 16, or if he is having some problem with seeing the insulin pen syringe and all that, if he injects 16 insulin, it's a high chance that he would land in hypoglycemia. Is it right or not? Hmm?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Is it right? What is one more
Right.
possibility? What is one more possibility? I'll ask somebody else for this one. Ramaraju. Ramaraju. Ramaraju is missing. Then we'll ask somebody else. Meghana. Meghana.
Yes, sir.
Meghana. It is Ramaraju.
Yes, sir.
I have asked one question to your colleague, like what is the common complication of insulin therapy? Then he shot back that it's hypoglycemia. So yeah, definitely. So what are the parameters which will dictate the elaboration of symptoms like hypoglycemia and diabetes? Means any inadvertent increase in dosage administration of insulin by mistake or by overlooking or by any chance, or maybe say like what are other parameters which will produce the hypoglycemia? What you can see? What are the other possibilities that you can think of? Like when you apply the knowledge of pharmacokinetics, or dosing, or timing, can you tell? Can you add to it more?
Yes, sir.
When we two are talking, is the entire class able to hear it?
When they miss a diet, sir, means when they miss to take food,
Uh,
means take if
please
there is
come again.
delay in means if there's delay in taking food after doing the injection, sir.
Yeah, very good, very good, very important and very practical. If you are taking the injection and if you are not taking the food, okay, so that will surely land you up in a hypoglycemic state. Very good. And what? Yeah, this is one important parameter. What else? Is there anything to do with the preparations? Preparations like you have ultra short acting or rapid acting, then regular or short acting, intermediate acting, and long acting. Is there any time interval that you need to keep in mind before giving these preparations? If you are taking
Mm.
regular insulin, you have to take it at least 60 minutes before. Okay.
Yes.
Whereas if you are taking short acting preparations or rapidly acting preparations, you have to take them 15 to 20 minutes before you are taking your food. Okay.
Okay, sir.
And there is no particular time rule for the long acting preparations. Say like insulin, Lent insulins, insulin detamir, insulin glargine, and all that. You can take them throughout any time of the day because they produce a consistent level or plasma concentrations of the insulin throughout the day. But you should take them at the same time of the day regularly. That is one important point. Okay. So they need not be timed essentially or necessarily with the intake of the food as such, long acting insulins. So this is one important point that one need to remember. Okay. So now move on to the other aspects covering the insulin. That is like say there are different kinds of syringes. Uh, so you can see over here how to give, how to wash, how to. So I will tell you some of the important and practical points as far as these are the ones which are the in things. That is the insulin pen. They are used as pre-filled pens and reusable or cartridges or pens. So they will be coming up with a specific. They will be coming up with a specific they'll be mentioned about the kind of preparation they are having, like if they are preparations of Lantus or they are preparations of short acting insulins, they will be given, and they will be color coded as well. So you people, you can also go and see some videos in YouTube, which will be of much help to you to really know how these insulin pens are used. So depending, so two or three important parameters that one need to keep in mind uh, how do you load the needle. It would be usually 2 mm or 4 mm needle standardly. So how do you insert it and ensure that it is properly fixed, and verify the insulin type, which is very important. So what kind of insulin you are giving before taking. But generally mistakes will not happen in this particular context, because if the doctor prescribes a certain insulin pen and the patient, if he is old or a seasoned patient, he will identify it with the kind of insulin he has been regularly taking, or even he can suspect a change if some different insulin pen has been given by the medical shop person, either in haste or in urgency or in confusion or mistake, or a new person is there. If at all they give a wrong prescription, then you can make it. But it is necessary to ensure the very first time you're using insulin pen to tally it with the kind of pen that has been prescribed by the doctor, and to calculate or calibrate the size of the dose that the doctor has prescribed. Means if he has prescribed, like say, 10 units of insulin length to be taken at bedtime, so then you have to take the pen, adjust the meter which is given below, rotate it, it goes by every 1 point will take the units to 2 units. So you have to turn it, which will ensure you that it has been filled by a click sound that comes, and you have to ensure that the right amount of insulin for that particular time of the day has been loaded and that has been taken. And you have to ensure that there is no air in the insulin pen. Sometimes it may happen that air may gain entry into it, and you may end up not giving the right amount of insulin which you have to give. After you push it, the air goes in and you think that the insulin dose has gone, but it is air that has gone in and not the insulin. So your glucose levels may not be adequately controlled for that particular dose, and you don't know why it happened like that. And inadvertently you may sometimes self medicate or increase the dose for yourself. Suppose you have to take 10 units and you again you injected some amount of air and not the insulin, and you check the glucose levels for your next dose, so they'll come obviously higher, and you may titrate yourself to an upper more dose, say like 10 to 16 units and so on. So that may ultimately cause more problem by ending you up in a bad hypoglycemia. So these kind of things should be very carefully be monitored. So it demands so much of common sense, intelligence, knowledge. And if you are in any kind of such doubt, two ways of mind, then you have to immediately call your doctor and get all your doubts cleared, and then go on or proceed with the insulin treatment thereby. So these are some important things: what type of insulin you are taking, have you loaded the right dose, and then sites of insulin delivery. Yeah, you can take them, say like below the umbilicus. If you put a smile like line below your umbilicus, as if it's a smiling umbilicus, a line below the umbilicus as a smiley laughing umbilicus, then you can give in those areas. You can give on the posterior aspect of your upper part of the arm, that is over the triceps. Then you can give it over your tummy, as I have told you, below the umbilicus. Then you can give on the lateral aspect of the thighs as such. So important things that you need to take up is you have to pinch a kind of skin, then you have to push the needle into the skin at 90 degrees. Then you have to push the plunger, delivering all the dose into the site of the injection, and then count for 10. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Then take out the insulin pen from that particular site. So that will allow the complete dose of the insulin that you want to give to get spread into the body and ensure its unabated action as such. So these are certain things. And yeah, of course, sterility is one important thing, that you have to wash your hands, choose the injection site, then clean the injection site. And apart from that, you have to rotate your injection sites very frequently to prevent any kind of lipodystrophy, or if you are giving it the same site again and again, so you may not be able to release or deliver the same amount of insulin time and again. So you have to rotate the sites every now and then in order to ensure that right amount of insulin is being delivered to the patient. So these are some important things that you need to take. And so as you can see, these are the important things. So all over, we can discuss this particular topic only with relevance to some of the important things. But I think you need to focus more upon the types of insulins, because newer insulins is one important fancy questions for examiners that may end up as an university exam question for you later. So you have to think about that. Then you have to think about the important adverse effects, and then maybe you have to see about even the pharmacodynamics of how it acts and all that, and also important pharmacological functions that one insulin has over different intermediary metabolism. So I think I have tried to touch upon some of the important aspects of the insulin and its usage. So yeah, I think this ends the class here. And I think I'm not sure like how many people are there for the class. It shows 132 out of 251. GV Krishnaraju, are you there? GV Krishnaraju. Let's see. Durga Prasad, roll number 50, Durga Prasad.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
So yeah, did you follow the class?
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Durga
Sir,
Prasad,
yes,
did you
sir.
follow the class? Okay. So yeah, so we discussed about insulin today, and I expect people to go again and take the book and read in detail. Okay. Okay, we'll end the class over here, and we'll join for
Sir?
our next class. We will end the class here, and we will join for our next class, which is about oral hypoglycemic drugs in the next class. Okay. So people can log out now.